Thank you very much. I have so many questions, and I'll start with the first that is at my mind right now.
Can you hear clearly?
Am I clear enough? Okay. My wife died a year ago and 2 months ago. And I hear you saying the first session we had, don't go for the past and go for the future. And 2 months ago was the first time I really mourned about her. I cried. I've never cried as much as I have. And then I hear you saying, don't cry. And what happened after that was that I felt very relieved.
Yes.
I was so happy that I finally could cry for my wife.
There's release in tears. There is a release of resistance in tears.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. And now, but the real question is, she died of cancer. We had 2 years of trying to cure her. And we are trying to be deliberate creators all the time. And we are not doing a very good job in creating deliberately. And I'm so afraid that if I hear you, that she created her own cancer. And I think that is kind of unfair of source. That cannot be the purpose of love. So I think it's unfair to assume that she created that herself. Could you help me out in this dilemma?
Well, it's an interesting thing that it comes back to this two ends of this stick that we are talking about, that when you really, really want something, that sometimes the power of your desire is counterbalanced with the exact opposite of it. In other words, the more you are asking for something, the more the potential for the other end of it being there. The best example that we've offered through the years, and this is a sort of sensitive thing for you, so we're going to sort of dance around it in a way till we can find a place that it will settle in for you. But the most significant thing to understand is that when you come forth into this physical experience, you come understanding that from it you will gather the desires and intentions that will call the energy through you. And everything that you are living in any moment is, we said this earlier, is the byproduct of this balance between the energy that you're calling and your ability to allow it to flow. Mm-hmm. We were visiting with a woman one day who was very defiant with us, feeling some of what you are describing here, because she was experiencing several very heavy diagnoses, and yet feeling that she was, for the most part, a positive person. And she said, I have a friend, Abraham, and I'm not kidding you. This friend is so negative. And this friend has no negative diagnosis. What's going on? If what you say is true, then what's going on? And we said, there are two important factors to understand. One is the power of the energy that's flowing through you. In fact, it was where the analogy of, if you're going 5 miles an hour and you hit a tree, it's uncomfortable and you may bruise your vehicle, but it's not a devastating encounter. But if you're going 100 miles an hour and you hit a tree, there's a bigger occurrence as a result of that clashing energy. So one of the things that gets in the way of a conversation like this is that there is an assumption that moving through this physical life experience is a bad thing, that the death experience is a bad thing. That's a premise that almost everyone begins with when they have a conversation like this, that is not a premise that your inner being agrees with, because your inner being stands as this robust evidence of the eternalness of that which you are, actually finding humor in the tragic, what you feel as endings, when there is never an ending. There's only a never-ending stream of this consciousness that is you. So it's always fascinating to interact with our physical friends who are feeling the discomfort of something that all of you know when you come into this physical experience. You all know that you are here to focus through this physical experience in a temporary way. And when we talk about, the reason that we're talking so precisely and deliberately is because those like you are calling this information through in a stronger than ever way, where, let's start in the beginning place here. So it's easy to accept that you didn't plan on being in these bodies forever. You knew it was going to be a temporary focal point. And as we visit with you about deliberate creation, it's easy to wrap your thoughts around the idea that from this life experience, you'll gather the details, like our friend talked about his early childhood, of who you really are and what you really want. And it's so satisfying to conceptually contemplate that life is going to give you clarity about what you want, and that with some deliberate intention that you can come into alignment with what you want, and therefore live that satisfying manifestation of all of that. But what is left out of this conversation, this specific conversation that you're having with a mate where you struggled and tried, and then ultimately she made her transition into non-physical, is the understanding that the transition into non-physical is always the ultimate intention of that which you all have going on. And that the understanding that is gained from this physical experience and that is put into the vortex, we really want to say to you that if we were standing in your physical shoes, and of course we aren't standing in your physical shoes, so let us speak to you as we're standing in our non-physical shoes, as we're standing in your non-physical shoes, as we're standing in the fullness that is the non-physical point of view of you, we have to say to you that the reward is as sweet when you come into the vortex, regardless of when you come into the vortex. That the bottom line is that you came as physical beings in order to give birth to this expanded state of being, and of course it's nice when you can bring yourself into balance. But here you are, still physically focused, still seeking your balance, and still potentially finding it, you see. So sometimes you come with agreements with one another. One of the most interesting things about your dearly departed is that they often give you a stronger than ever focus upon what is non-physical, and in an odd way can lead you to alignment while you're still physically focused that you would not have access to otherwise. And in the process of that, you come into a clear understanding of the wholeness that we all are all of the time. And it tends to help you to then blur the lines between this life and death, between this birth and death that has physical humans so hogtied. It's really an interesting thing to watch you as physical beings. You are so worried about death that few of you are really living. And it's such an ironic thing, given the fact that there is no death, you see.
The 2 years that we had, the last 2 years, were very beautiful, and in a sense, they were
Yes.
hard in a sense.
Yes.
But I still have the feeling that I'm not allowed to mourn, because I should be happy all the time. I should be glad that she's dying, and I don't understand that. Or that she's not here anymore, that she made the transition.
It isn't. You certainly are allowed to mourn. But we would put it to you this way. Your inner being isn't mourning. And so when you do, the discomfort is the separation between you and your inner being.
Okay.
You see, that's the thing that is hard to get around. I mean, it's hard to get your thoughts around, is that quite often someone will say, here's the most fun and vivid example of this. A woman saying to me, to Abraham, to us in a gathering like this, Abraham, I am so sad because my lover left. My lover left. My lover left. I'm sad because my lover left. I'm sad because my lover left. And we said, no, you're not. And she said, Abraham, I'm sad because my lover left. I'm sad because my lover left. We said, no, you're not. She wanted to get out of the chair and wring our neck. Abraham, I'm sad because my lover left. Because she said, I wasn't sad, and then my lover left, and now I'm sad. So I must be sad because my lover left. And we said, you're sad because you are focused in a way that is disallowing who you really are, and you're using the fact that your lover left as your excuse not to be who you really are. But that, we know it's not the easiest thing to get your thoughts around, but if you can just begin by accepting that any time you are feeling uncomfortable, it is always because you have found some way of focusing on a subject that is a deviation from your true knowledge. And on this subject of death, it's really an interesting thing, because your inner being is not worried about death, because in the strictest sense, your inner being is dead. We're being funny there.
Okay.
In other words, that's as dead as it gets. Full conscious awareness, never-ending potential for expansion, full robust interaction with that which you are. In other words, no ending, no ending, no ending, no ending. And so sometimes you feel, and you pick this up along your physical trail, you feel an obligation to suffer sometimes, as if you're not suffering, then you're approaching it wrong, because almost everybody you know would suffer under those conditions. But almost everybody you know doesn't really know who they really are, and hasn't really been working to tune into who they really are, and hasn't accepted the fact that there is no distinction that matters between what is physical and non-physical. You are an interesting group, because you're willing to come and have a conversation with us here, allowing Abraham to express through Esther. And maybe it's because of the physicalness of Esther. In other words, just now, as Esther was getting ready to translate our story, between the conversation between the woman and Abraham, the woman and Abraham, the woman and Abraham, Esther used the word I as she was standing in the Abraham context, which is it was a stumble in the sense that we are always we. But we are wanting you to blur that line between the I and the we, the I and the we, the I and the we, because I is we and we is I. In other words, we are all in this together. So,
thank you.